to US Tzu Chi 360. I'm Ginger Chang. Today, I report to you from New Orleans in our two-part feature to commemorate the 7th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. I think many of you are wondering how the community is doing here. And I have to tell you, New Orleanians are resilient and stronger than ever. I am very privileged to have the co-director and the founding member of the Disaster Resiliency Leadership Academy with me today, Dr. Charles Figley. Welcome, Dr. Figley.
Thanks, Ginger.
So first off, the Academy was created due to the poor response and disaster management of the government post-Katrina. So can you tell us what does the Academy aims to achieve?
What we hope to achieve is to develop throughout the world the capacity for more effective leadership in humanitarian assistance. It's as simple as that. And one is psychosocial and understanding yourself, understanding other people, being able to sense if you've worked too much or if you're pushing the people that you're supervising too much. Another huge area is leadership analytics. The last one is really the environment. A disaster leaves footprints just like a human being does. And as we try to help these various communities that are affected, we need to be very sensitive that we're on their land and we will leave their land, and we have the responsibility to not do any harm at the very least.
Academic pillars that you just mentioned are basically the lessons learned from Katrina, and this is what you teach.
Yes.
Okay, let's go see in the first segment how the community here, especially at Tulane University, have been doing so far.
There were a total of 50 breaches in the flood protection system during Katrina.
Just remember driving by myself for miles and miles and miles and thinking, where does this stop? Where does all this devastation stop?
Late August, early September, it was over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. It was hot, it was humid, and they were stuck on a rooftop for 3 or 4 days. Nobody came to rescue them.
My building is 14 blocks away from the river, and it flooded quite significantly, about 3.5 feet, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but all the buildings in that area flooded to the same degree, and everything was a mess.
A lot of folks, the worrying is the hardest thing. Worrying if you ever get back in your home, worrying if you get back to where you live all your life, and I think it's heartbreaking. We had about 8 to 9 feet of water around here. You can imagine the water was up to the rafters of the house. So everything that was in the attic, it flooded all the way up to the attic of the house. So my name is Dwayne Mallett. I'm a clerk here in New Orleans, and I lived in this neighborhood since 1997. And I'm here speaking about my home that was flooded in 2005 due to Katrina.
This area is Gentilly, where Dwayne Mallett has lived for the past 15 years. When Hurricane Katrina made landfall on August 29th in 2005, the water level in Gentilly reached over 10 feet. Hurricane Katrina generated a record storm surge of over 21 feet. 80% of New Orleans was flooded. At least 1,836 people died in Louisiana, and a mandatory evacuation was called for the first time in the city's history.
I come every day. I pass by every day. So either bringing some of my belongings into it, and or we do a little work that needs to be done in the inside. But I come around every day, or my wife come around every day. So this is my house, the greenhouse that's elevated, maybe 8 to 9 feet high. I haven't been able to go home yet because I'm still stuck in the process of getting closure on the elevation process after my home was flooded and rebuilt it and elevated it. I used a lot of my funds to elevate it. That, of course, took from doing the rest of the house that I needed. And rebuilding it, it was required that you elevate it if you was going to come back in the area. The state is running a program that they were supposed to help you with elevating your home for any future flood. But I think if I get through that process, I'll be home real soon.
My name is Sandy Rosenthal, and I founded a group called levees.org in the weeks and months right after the flood, because people need to understand the truth about the flooding. People need to understand that the flooding of New Orleans was a man-made disaster, not the ravages of a hurricane.
New Orleans was originally settled on natural levees or high ground along the Mississippi River. A recent study by Tulane University and Xavier University notes that 51% of New Orleans is at or above sea level. On the other hand, about 49% of New Orleans parishes are currently below sea level and continues to sink. New Orleans is built on thousands of feet of soft sand, silt, and clay. However, due to major flood control structures being built upstream on the Mississippi River and the man-made levees being built around New Orleans, fresh layers of sediment are now replenishing the ground lost by subsidence.
The flooding of New Orleans was really twofold. One, it's due to the failure of a federally flood protection system that should have performed and didn't. That's very true. But the other reason that we flooded is because of the degradation and the death of our protective wetlands that for the past 100 years have been destroyed mainly for two reasons.
It's one of the largest coastal wetland systems in the world. So that took 7,000 years to build. And if you had gone back even just 200 years, maybe 300 years, just about a quarter mile away, we're close to the river here. We would have been above sea level barely, but we would have been in cypress swamp, which is a very important habitat here in coastal Louisiana.
The reason number one is the leveeing of the Mississippi River, or turning the Mississippi into a canal, and so that we couldn't have natural flooding, so that our wetlands couldn't be replenished. That's reason number one. Reason number two is oil and gas exploration. Over the past 40 years, our wetlands have been carved up and destroyed, or nearly destroyed, in oil and gas exploration for the benefit of the country. So for the benefit of the country, New Orleans was almost destroyed. And that's another very important fact that Dr. Mefford is very right about.
So nature took 7,000 years to build this system, but what we've done, particularly in the past 150 years, through leveeing of the Mississippi River, through oil and gas exploration, through navigation waterways to promote commerce, and through all sorts of other development throughout the coastal zone, that these wetlands, for hundreds of years, provided critical storm surge protection when hurricanes would be coming in. Some of the metrics indicate that it would take about 2 to 3 miles of wetlands to reduce a storm surge by 1 foot. So when we think about Katrina, where we had, say, a 27-foot storm surge, that could have been reduced significantly through these natural systems.
The levee that you see here is a rebuilt wall done in what should have been done in the first place. It's called a T-wall. T-walls go down much, much further. They're supported with horizontal beams and go down much, much deeper. Nothing will knock that wall over. Absolutely nothing. And that's what we should have had before Katrina. The levee system protecting the eastern side of Greater New Orleans is 350 miles. That is a lot of levees. As you can see, the big difference between the walls. The eye wall is a different color. It is a different texture. If you were a bird flying over it, you would see that it's 2 feet thicker.
However, with these levees and flood walls is that they can provide short-term protection to communities in terms of flooding, but what you ultimately do when you build a levee, if this is a continuous wetland here, you build a levee here, the ocean's here, it may protect people living on this side of the levee in the short term, but what it ultimately does is it basically disrupts the natural hydrology that maintained that wetland for hundreds or thousands of years. And so in the long term, it's very detrimental to the wetlands that surround it. So we have to be very careful about where we want to apply levees versus natural protection. And as the research that I did at Tulane, we are always promoting what we call ecostructures in many ways, that it's these natural systems that are very critical as part of the multiple lines of defense. You have a barrier island, that reduces storm surge. You have a back bay, that reduces storm surge. You have coastal wetlands, that reduces storm surge. And then maybe you start getting into flood walls and pumping systems and other things that reduce vulnerabilities. But if the extent to which you can have natural systems that provide critical habitat but also reduce that storm surge is critical.
It's very important that we have both natural barriers, healthy barriers, and man-made barriers.
To have humans and our ecology coexisting at the same time, both is better.
The university was closed for 4 full months during the fall of 2005. There was no mail delivered to the city for over 6 months. The email and internet services were down at the university for over 2 months. It was a very, very difficult time to try to communicate with people, the faculty and the staff. So there was a lot of activity and energy trying to understand how we were going to get the university running again. It was a massive effort, and it cost hundreds of millions of dollars to clean up.
Tulane did a very nice job of getting us back into our building quite quickly. We were back, the hurricane occurred on August the 29th, of course. We were able to get back in our building on December the 1st, which was really a very happy day, and we were very excited to get back into the building. I remember very clearly going back in and being quite optimistic about the future, and classes were going to start in January. The population of the city was about 450,000 in 2005, before Katrina hit, and it had been slowly declining every year. At the last census in 2000, it was just below 500,000, 484,000. It's been slowly decreasing, as many other major cities in the U.S.
New Orleans has fared very, very well after 7 years. There's a large number of young people who are moving into the city to start new projects, and as a result, there's a whole new system of education in place in the city. So we now have wonderful schools, not all of them, but many are doing great things.
Because of the flooding, the buildings were just wiped off the foundations and they're gone. But you can see no one's moved back because the devastation was so great. Who wants to move back to a neighborhood where you're the only one there? And not many people like to live that way.
Oh, I love the area, and I always said I would come back, and I always said I would rebuild. I'll come back to a neighborhood to raise my family. I think the area would be vibrant again. I think more people will come back.
Within our tourism, with conventions, and things that are going on right now, I would see that things are much better in many ways, although it was very sad of what took place at that time. Katrina washed away a lot, but it didn't wash away the people's faith. The faith here was extremely strong, and it's because of their resilience, their desire to rebuild, that they came back.
So Dr. Figley, you have more than 35 years experience as a trauma scholar. Then what are some challenges you saw post-Katrina in regards to disaster survivors' mental health?
For New Orleans, there is this, I think, this embedded sense of sadness. After 8 years, I think it's the cold, hard reality that this is a new normal. There is this certain level of sadness that's there for the things that will never come back, but a certain degree of optimism that they can't help but recognize that things are getting better and better.
Does it come as a surprise to you, the resiliency of the people?
It was certainly surprising to me as the picture of this devastation emerged. There is a, in Tulane's faculty lounge, there's this beautiful tapestry of a tree, looking a lot like this one actually, that has the names of universities on the branches. And 2005, when much of the campus was underwater, universities were opening their doors and welcoming these students in as a haven. Then they came back. What shocked me was that despite the university being shut down, despite the fact that 80% of the city was flooded and about 50% of it was destroyed, that they just did what they needed to do, and they did. And I think because there was a sufficient number of them that returned, they felt that they were not alone. So.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Are you okay?
No, this is just.
Okay.
I feel the compassion and just the strength and power and resilience of these people that I've worked with since 2008. So it's tears of joy. Yeah.
Well, keeping in vein with the resiliency theme, we're going to take a short break, okay? And in this segment, we're going to meet another group of individuals, the Lower 9 Org, who are doing their best to rebuild the Lower 9th Ward, which was one of the hardest hit areas after Katrina.
We're going over to Conrad Bailey's house, where we have Darren McKinney as crew leader. They're basically repairing a lot of termite damage because the contractors who rebuilt it did not use the right materials. Today we have 4 houses running, trying to complete the house so that we can have it ready for the homeowner to move right back into.
My name is James Herman. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. Originally it was only going to be 10 months, but I ended up staying down here for almost 3 years now. Lower9.org, we're a rebuilding organization, and what we do is we help people who can't normally rebuild. We only work in the Lower 9th Ward, which is a 2 square mile area, but it was also the heaviestly affected. And what we do is we provide skilled crew leaders with unskilled volunteers, and we go through and we rebuild houses with materials that homeowners buy.
I'm a homeowner, and I really appreciate Lower 9, Darren, and this group to come give me a hand to repair my porch. Due to using cheap materials, so now we are in the process of changing out all the white pine wood and going back with pressure treated wood to prevent this ever happening again.
It's a good thing to do between my undergrad and grad school. I had time, and I was able to fill in for somebody else that had to drop out last minute. And, you know, it's better than sitting at home and you can come and help.
We can have fun anytime. We just come here to help. You know, we just give back. That's really what it boils down to.
That's what you got. So Lower9.org exists to use volunteer labor on skilled rebuilding projects, and we have been fortunate enough to have volunteers from all over the world come and work with us. In last year, in 2011, we had volunteers from 16 different countries.
Every day, someone takes a turn. We're very good about taking turns. Everyone takes a turn with something. No one gets away with not doing anything. New Orleans is a very special place, and the culture here is unlike anywhere else in the United States, and it's responsible for some of the best music that we've given the world. I am a waitress, so I saved up a lot of tips to come out here.
You know, I was so impressed that people still remember Katrina after 7 years. I'm shocked because human nature, not just Americans, but human nature, you forget after a while. We get all excited. We're going to help Haiti. We're going to help Africa. Coming down here and seeing the people and the places, you know, we're getting more out of it than they are. I mean, even though they're getting a home, like, it really feels like the country got really small for us. And the whole country is my neighborhood now.
It's knowing that there's things, like I'm bringing people home with something I created, like my creation means the world to somebody. I mean, but I had some lady who just came up and just hugged me, and I'm like a big guy, but she just attacked and like tackled me almost to give me a hug, saying she loved me, thank you so much for what I was doing and all that kind of stuff. And it's, you know, it's hard to say no to that kind of stuff.
And Project Homecoming is a nonprofit that builds resilient neighborhoods and help out people who have been victims of contractor fraud, or they're elderly, or they just don't have enough resources to complete their homes from either Katrina, or it's just been so long that they can't come back.
My first year, my volunteers nicknamed me the construction goddess. One of the groups gave me this, and so I now hang it in every house that I work on. The first day I start, I hang it up, and when it's completely done, it goes to the next house.
Keep your tool and your tray as clean as you can, because it will get dry and crusty.
My name is Christina Drake. I came down here almost 5 years ago from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to help rebuild New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, February 19th, 2007. And that's the day I got fired from my job for missing so much work. Wow, now what am I going to do? I don't know how to explain how I got the answer, but it was very, 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 very clear to me. And the answer was immediately, now you can go to New Orleans and help.
And flat, use the same pressure all the way through. There you go.
The very first day I met Consuela, the house was just partially wrapped with tar paper. So it had been sitting exposed for a while. And then I sat and talked with her for a couple hours and, you know, got her story and saw she's probably one of the most deserving people I've ever built a house for. On the way home, I said, thank you, God, for putting me on this house. I've worked on about 30. This is number 12. The construction managers that we have over the worksite managers actually have construction background, and so they are very helpful. They don't get upset when you call them 20 times in a day, literally. That and making mistakes helps, and what helped me immensely was when I do get a skilled volunteer for a week, just stick to them like glue and be a sponge. Learn everything that I can from them.
I had wanted to come for a really long time, but I was very little when Hurricane Katrina happened. So when this opportunity came up with my school, I figured it would be a great way to give back.
Okay, here you go.
I decided to come here because a lot of people don't know about all the devastation that's still here, even 6 years later. And I really wanted to help and make a difference in the lives of the people here.
Don't be afraid to try. I tell my volunteers all the time, most of what I know, I learned the hard way by making the mistake. Once you make that mistake, probably won't do it again. I say it all the time, you could never write me a check big enough to give me the feeling I get when I say, you get to move back in your house. You can't match that. It's just not even possible.
Welcome back. So Dr. Figley, nearly 7 years later now, what improvements have you seen in regards to the mental health of the community here?
I think it's significantly better. It's interesting. I wrote a book in 1978, and I talked about time heals wounds, emotional wounds, and after time gone by, there is healing that takes place, and there is this slight sense of doom as hurricane season comes forward, that as every hurricane season goes through without a tragedy, it increases everyone's confidence here, and as everything seems to be improving, there is real hope that things will get better and better and better, and they are.
Then what about you personally?
I couldn't be happier here. I feel that I have been part of a phoenix rising. There's new hope, there's new optimism, and I've never seen it before.
I was wondering if you could give us some tips in regards to the volunteers helping the survivors in terms of trauma and community recovery.
Mostly what people need following a disaster are friends, are people who will open their heart and who will provide what they need at the time. Sometimes they don't need to talk. Sometimes they need water. Sometimes they need ice. Sometimes they need just a hand on top of a hand. But that must be dictated by the people there.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but Tzu Chi volunteers, whenever we hand over our aid supplies, we always bow 90 degrees. Because our founder is always telling us, when you're there, you are a guest, you are learning from them. And it's an opportunity, you know, to help them. So thank you very much for coming onto the show. And please continue to do what you're doing. Thank you. And I hope all of you guys enjoyed today's show. And I'll see you next week for the second part of our feature on Hurricane Katrina.